Welcome everybody to today's session. Today is part 3 in a 3-part series on how to have a thriving marriage. If you haven't watched the other 2 videos, I encourage you to go to my YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. But watch part 1 and part 2 of this series before you watch this one, because this one will make a lot more sense. Part 1 talked about 3 types of marriages. They were train wreck marriages, surviving marriages, and thriving marriages. And to have a thriving marriage, you need to put in effort and work consistently throughout the marriage. Part 2 discussed 3 important principles that it takes to have a thriving marriages. These were taken from Sternberg's triangular theory of love. And these principles include intimacy, which is the emotional connection, passion, which is the attraction and the sexual part of the relationship, and commitment. In this session, we're going to talk about how each of these principles go together to have a thriving marriage. And we're also going to look at how men and women look at each of these principles differently, or specifically the intimacy and the passion part of the triangle. As men and women, we tend to place a greater emphasis on either intimacy or passion. And it's obvious that stereotypically, men put more of a focus on the passion, which again is the attraction and the sexual part of the relationship, and women put more of an emphasis on the intimacy or the emotional connection in the relationship. As a marriage therapist, I focus on the intimacy or the emotional connection of the relationship, because it's my experience that when the intimacy and the emotional connection is strong between husband and wife, the passion takes care of itself. And we have this belief in our society that men are more sexual, that men enjoy sex more, and that it's all about the man in the relationship, as I discussed in part 2. And I don't think this is the case. It is my experience, again, that when a woman or the wife in the marriage is emotionally connected or feels secure in the emotional connection in the relationship, her desire for the passion in the relationship is just as high as the man's, and sometimes, and oftentimes, even more so. I know that may be hard to believe, but I believe most women agree with this. It's up to us men to know how to be intimate in the relationship. So for a woman, if there's no emotional connection in the relationship, her interest in sex is going to be nil to none. Whereas a man, if there's not much intimacy or emotional connection in the relationship, he can be like, we can still have sex, right? And the answer is no, not if you want a thriving marriage. Yes, there's a lot of couples and there's a lot of women that give in to their husband's sexual desires and wants because they think that's what they're supposed to do, and they may go through with it. They may have the sexual piece of the relationship, but it's not because they want it. It's more out of an obligation and a duty. And when this happens, we cannot have a thriving marriage. Because remember, in part 2 also, we talked about the passion piece of the relationship needs to be mutually satisfying. And when a wife is participating in the sexual part of the relationship out of obligation and duty, this is not mutually satisfying. So we have to focus more on the emotional connection more than we do the passion. Because if we do that, again, the passion comes naturally. And that's what we want. We want it to be a natural process. We want people to be emotionally connected and spend the time to know each other and to share deeply, as we discussed in session 2. And if we do that, we will be able to have the complete triangle. So it's really important to put, I would say, the emphasis and most of the energy in the relationship on the intimacy or the emotional connection in the relationship. If we do that, again, everything will fall into place. But I think we get it backwards. A lot of times we think, oh, if our sexual part of the relationship is active and strong, then the intimacy will be there. And that is true to some extent. In thriving marriages where there is emotional connection, yes, definitely, a healthy sexual relationship also improves the intimacy and the emotional connection. Ask any woman if this is the case, and most will tell you that is true. And it's true for us men as well. We also need emotional connection, because if there is just passion or there's sex without intimacy, then eventually, yes, even for men, that does wear on the relationship, and that is not going to be fulfilling. Despite what they may say, it is not the case. We need the emotional connection to be fulfilled in the passion. But let's talk briefly about some principles in having a healthy sexual relationship. To have a healthy sexual relationship, I think a lot is on the shoulders of the man in the relationship, because it's our approach, it's our attitude towards the sexual relationship that is going to help the wife feel comfortable, feel safe, feel respected, and help her have a mutually satisfying experience. All too often, I find that this is a very selfish part of the relationship, and guys are thinking only of themselves. Let's talk about a couple of do's and don'ts to have a mutually satisfying sexual relationship. First and foremost, I believe the biggest turnoff in a relationship when it comes to the sexual part of the relationship is pressure. And usually that pressure is coming from us men to the wives. If we're constantly pressuring, or if that's all that seems to be on our mind, and we are just putting it on them to have sex with us whenever we want, that's going to be a major turnoff, and that's going to make it difficult for the wife to have a good experience. They are not going to want to participate when they're feeling pressure. So guys, we have to back off. We have to give them space in this area. I tell guys all the time, nobody has ever died from not having sex. I know that may be hard to believe for some men, but it is true. We're not going to die if we don't have sex as often as we want. That's the plain truth. Another don't is to ask at inappropriate times. I think one of the biggest faux pas that men do is, in timing, is they wake their wife up to have sex with them. Maybe it's when they come home from work, wife's asleep already, maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's whenever. But men, that should be an absolute do not do. I have never worked with a wife in a marriage that enjoys being woken up to have sex. This is an absolute no. So if you're doing that, stop it right now. That is not a way to have a thriving marriage. And I almost guarantee every wife watching this will agree with me in that area. What we want to do is really put the power in their hands. And I know this is scary for a lot of guys. And if I tell a guy or a couple to only have sex when the wife initiates it, he freaks out. He thinks to himself, I'm never going to have sex. Well, yeah, if you treat her poorly or if there's pressure, you probably won't. If you focus on the emotional connection, and remember from video 2, that's the respect, the trust, the speaking her love language, and being able to share deeply with her, then again, I promise you do that on a consistent basis, her desire to be physically intimate will be there, because this is a natural, biological, human drive within all of us, both males and females. And so there's a couple of things that I would strongly encourage, and to understand that when we have a strong emotional connection, that will drive a strong physical connection in the relationship. How does commitment play in all of this? Well, I believe we have to be committed to both the emotional connection and the intimacy in the relationship, and we have to be committed to the passion. But if there's already conflict in the marriage, or the marriage isn't very strong and we're working at strengthening it, then that commitment has to be first and foremost to the emotional connection and the intimacy, not the passion. I never send a couple that comes in for counseling home with the homework assignment to just go home and have more sex. That doesn't happen. Sorry, guys. What I do is tell them, learn how to be emotionally connected. Again, that is the emphasis. I know I've said it a bunch here, but I want to drive that point home. Now, in a healthy, thriving marriage, then there's commitment to the passion. Then there's going to be times on both sides that maybe it's not convenient to be physically intimate at a certain time, or maybe somebody just doesn't feel up to it 100%. Sometimes we need to push through that. Sometimes we need to have that physical connection, even when we're not in the mood per se. But that's rare. Again, the emphasis is on commitment to the emotional connection. When we do that, the other will take place. Because if you look at it from a time standpoint, the amount of time that we spend in the passion part of the relationship is significantly lower. Significantly compared to the time that we spend in emotional connection. And so it just makes sense that we're going to spend a lot more time, energy, and effort into having a satisfying emotional connection, not vice versa. But so many times we think we need to put more emphasis on the physical and not the emotional, when in my experience that's not the case. When the emotional is taken care of, the physical will be taken care of automatically and naturally. If not, then yes, you can go to counseling and talk about what's blocking a healthy physical relationship. But in the counseling office, I'm spending a lot more time focusing and putting the emphasis on the emotional connection. So that's my thoughts on how they all go together. If you have any questions, please let me know, or please comment on your thoughts on this. I would really like to know what you're thinking. And if you've heard something that you disagree with, put that in there. Unless you're a guy and you think, no, the wife just needs to have more sex with the guy and everything will be okay. I won't agree with you in that, and I'll challenge you. And you're probably not having a thriving marriage if that's your attitude. But I do want to hear from you. I do want to know what you think and what your experience is in this in your relationship. I hope this has been helpful. And again, if it has, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get all the future videos that come out. Please give it a thumbs up and like it, and please comment on it. Please share your thoughts again. And please share it with somebody that this may be helpful. Until next time, make it a great day and make it a great week.